Assalamualaikum. Good day and hello everyone. I am Nur Alia Salwa Muhammad Ruzan. I am from Tassel 3. I am going to present my slide to you guys with the topic of contextual dimension of English, a study of cultural and interpersonal factors. Today, we are diving into a fundamental concept for effective communication, especially in English language teaching, the power of context. Let's move on to the next slide to know more about what is context. As our slide clearly states, context is the entire situation, background, or environment in which communication happens. It's not just the words we say, it's the who, where, when, and why. Who is speaking? Who is listening? Where are they? What is their relationship? What happened just before this conversation? And the most crucial, essential part is what is their shared cultural understanding. Because without this framework, communication breaks down. Well, it's like a simple word like light could mean not heavy, or a lamp, or the color white. So without context, it's ambiguous and can be completely misunderstood. Since we are going to explore two different of context, I will first be explaining about the cultural context. As the slide defines it, cultural context is the overarching system of shared beliefs, values, social norms, customs, behavior, and historical experiences that define a group of people. Let's think of it not as a visible set of rules, but as an invisible rulebook that we all learn from birth. This rulebook shapes everything from how we perceive the world to most importantly for us how we use language. The effect of misreading this rulebook is where cross-cultural misunderstandings happen. Let's look at three key areas that I have prepared where this is most evident. For the first area is greeting and politeness. Let's start with something simple, which is a greeting, the question of how are you? Well, for this part, there are going to be two different contexts of culture. The first one is low context cultures, and the next one is high context cultures. In low context cultures like the US or UK, this phrase is primarily a social ritual. It is a way of acknowledging someone, and the expected answer is almost always brief, positive, and preferably an automatic response like good, thanks, and you? It's like a verbal handshake. If you were to actually stop and detail your digestive problems, you'd be breaking the cultural rule. You'd be violating the invisible rulebook. Now, it is very different from high context culture. The contrast is that with high context cultures that has been used in countries like Russia or Malaysia, in these cultures, the same question, how are you, is often taken literally. It is seen as a genuine expression of care and interest. If you ask it, you should be prepared to listen to the real answer. Well, sometimes someone might start telling you about their day, their family, or their problems. What is a polite ritual in one culture is a sincere invitation for conversation in another. So let's imagine a situation where an American tourist in Moscow, Russia, quickly saying "How are you?" to a shopkeeper, and walking away. Well, in the American perspective, they has fulfilled their social ritual, but the Russian shopkeeper might perceive that same American person as incredibly rude or insincere. This single phrase shows how cultural contexts give completely different meanings to the exact same word. Let's move on to the second key area, which is communication style. We are going to move into a more complex area, which is how we give feedback or criticism. This is where cultural context really dictates our approach. The same with greeting and politeness, there will be two different type of the area. In this type of key area, the two different type is direct communication and indirect communication. Indirect communication cultures like the Netherlands or the US, the goal is often clarity and efficiency, and their feedback is preferably straightforward and honest. A very common technique that has been used by them is the compliment sandwich. It is where you start with something positive and then you state the criticism clearly in the middle and you end with another positive note. Let's take an example for in a setting of business meeting. The feedback will sound like your presentation was engaging. However, the data in section 2 is incorrect. Well, I really love your closing slide though. Well, even with the soft edges, the critical message the data was wrong is explicit and undeniable. But it is contrast with indirect communication cultures that has been used in Japan or Thailand. The supreme value is often harmony and preserving face, which means avoiding embarrassment or shame for yourself and others. In Thailand, they call it khao krang, and in Japan, they call it mensu. Well, it is more of a concept of saving people's faces. Therefore, criticism is heavily softened. It might be delivered through a third person, phrased as a vague suggestion, or only hinted at. That some feedback about incorrect data might sound like this. Thank you for your presentation. For the next one, perhaps we could all explore some different data sources to see what we might find. The message is there, but it is buried in suggestion and collective language. We could. To someone from a direct culture, this might seem evasive and they might be wondering, why can't you just be honest with me? I prefer it to be straightforward. But however, for the opposite side, the indirect culture, the direct compliment sandwich might still feel brutally blunt and confrontational. Now, let's explore how it shapes one of our most fundamental concepts and values, time itself. This is the three key that I'm going to explain, which is concept and values. But I'm going to focus on time. The way we perceive and value time is deeply cultural, and misunderstanding this can lead to significant friction. This slide especially highlights two primary cultural perspectives on time, which is monochronic and polychronic. Well, this isn't about watches and clocks. It's about a culture's underlying values. Whether it prioritizes schedules or punctuality or relationships and adaptability. Well, let's start with monochronic time first. Well, monochronic time is used by countries such as Switzerland and Germany. Let's take the example of simple phrase like, let's meet at 3 p.m. In monochronic cultures like Switzerland and Germany, time is treated as a precise, tangible commodity. It is segmented, scheduled, and managed. The value here is on order, efficiency, and respect for commitments. Punctuality or Pünktlichkeit in German is not just a preference, it's a sign of respect for the other person's time. Therefore, when they say 3 p.m. means 3:00. Arriving at 3:05 is considered late and it can be perceived as rude, unprofessional, or irresponsible. The schedule dictates the interaction. But for polychronic time, that has been used by countries like Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and India, it is very contrast and different. With the same phrase like let's meet on 3 p.m. Here, time is seen as fluid, flexible, and relational. The primary value is on building and maintaining relationships. So, a 3 p.m. meeting is an approximation, a general time to aim for. As you know, Saudi Arabia and Malaysia is actually an Islamic country. So, it also depends on their prayer time, when to meet and where to meet. It's understood that the completion of a current face-to-face interaction is far more important than strictly adhering to a predetermined schedule for the next one. So a meeting might start later and flow longer. Well, this isn't a lack of respect. It's a different expression of respect. Respect for the person you are currently with. So, for monochronic, it's respecting the person's time. But for the polychronic, it's respecting the person you are currently with. So, what's the key takeaway? A German business person might see a delayed meeting in Riyadh as disorganized, while their Saudi counterpart might see the Germans' rigid adherence to the clock as impersonal or even sometimes rude. The point is not that one system is better than the other. The point is that our view of time is not universal. It is different. To communicate and collaborate effectively across cultures, we must understand that a simple phrase like 3 p.m. carries an entire cultural rulebook with it. Recognizing this invisible difference is the first step toward building true cross-cultural understanding. So, what does this all mean for us as a students of language and communication? Firstly, it means that there is no single correct way to communicate. Neither the direct nor the indirect style is inherently better. They are just different, rooted in deep cultural values. Secondly, it moves our goal from just achieving linguistic accuracy, using the right grammar and vocabulary, to achieving pragmatic competence. That is, knowing how to use that language appropriately in a specific cultural context. Finally, understanding cultural context is the ultimate tool for empathy and effective cross-cultural interaction. It allows us to interpret others' action generously and adjust our own communication to be understood as we intended. In essence, learning a language is like learning a culture. This is why context is so crucial. It is the key that unlocks true meaning. It's the difference between a sentence in a textbook and a real living conversation. For us as a future language teachers and learners, this is especially critical. We must teach more than just vocabulary and grammar. We must teach how to use that language appropriately within different situational and cultural frameworks. We have to provide the context so that our student can move from speaking correctly to communicating effectively. So to summarize, context is the essential framework for meaning. It prevents misunderstanding and breathes life into language. It is our job to understand it, teach it, and use it. Recognizing this invisible difference is the first step toward building true cross-cultural understanding. We have explored how culture shapes our communication. Now, let's zoom in even further to the most immediate level, the interpersonal context. Well, interpersonal context is more about the specific relationship between people who are communicating. Well, as the slide defines it, interpersonal context is the social dynamics that shapes our language. It answers a fundamental question we all ask ourselves unconsciously before we speak. Who am I talking to, and what is our relationship? The core idea here is that we are all linguistic chameleons. We constantly and automatically adjust our language, our register, tone, word choice, and even our grammar. It based and depends on who our listener is. Well, I have prepared you guys the 3 branches, and I'm going to break it down to you for each branches. These branches influence every interaction we have. Let's think of this as the 3 dimensions of any relationship. For the first one is power or status. This is the vertical relationship. Is there a hierarchy? Are you talking to a CEO or an intern? The second one is distance or closeness. This is the horizontal relationship. How well do you know them? Are they a stranger or close friend? And for the last branch is role and setting. This is the situational relationship. What is the context of the interaction? Are you seeing your teacher in a formal class or later coaching your football team? These three factors combine in every single conversation to dictate the appropriate way to speak. I'm going to dip even deeper into each branches. But let's take a deeper dive into the first branch, power and status. This is often the most formally enforced dimension of interpersonal context. The key question here is one person in a position of authority over the other? Classic examples are a student versus the teacher, employee versus boss, or a child versus a parent. This power dynamic has a profound linguistic effect. When speaking with someone of higher status, we instinctively switch to a more formal register. Let's break down what that looks like. First, the first one is title. We use honorifics and titles like Doctor, Sir, Professor, or Mr. and Mrs. with their last name. We avoid using first names unless invited to. The second one is word choice and grammar. When we are speaking to someone formally, we choose like a more formal vocabulary and complete grammatical structures instead of a direct command like explain this to me. We use polite indirect requests like would it be possible for you to explain this? Or I was wondering if you could clarify this point. And the last one is tone. The tone is more reserved and respectful. The opposite is also true. A manager uses more direct language with an intern, but would likely switch to a more indirect polite register when making a request to the company CEO. This adjustment isn't usually fake. It's like a natural linguistic sign of respect for the position and relationship. And we are going to apply this in real world application. So why is understanding this so critical for us, especially in language teaching? Well, the first and foremost part is it shows that effective communication is not one size fits all. We are using a various and wide variety of way of speaking. So teaching someone to just say hello isn't enough. We must teach them when and to whom to say hello, good morning sir, oh hey, what's up? Second, it highlights the concept of pragmatic competence, the ability to use language appropriately in social situations. A learner might have perfect grammar, but can cause great offense by using overly familiar language with someone in a position of power or in someone that has a higher authority. And finally, mastering interpersonal context is the key to social fluency. It is what allows us to navigate complex social landscape, build rapport, show respect, and ultimately be understood, not just correctly, but appropriately. So, in essence, understanding interpersonal context means understanding that language isn't just about what you say, but who you are saying it to. We discussed how power shapes our language. Now let's complete the picture with the other two branches of interpersonal context, social distance and social role, and see how it all fits together. For the second branch is social distance or closeness. This is if the first branch is for the vertical dimension of a relationship, while the second branch is more about the horizontal dimension of a relationship. The key question that I took here is simple. How well do we know each other? Think of the spectrum, like from a stranger to an acquaintance to a close friend, and lastly to a family. The linguistic effect is something we all experience daily. With a close friend, our language is a toolbox of casualness. We use slang such as caps, for real, and etc. Inside jokes, nicknames, and contractions like wanna go or hey, dude. But with a stranger, we immediately switch to a standard, polite, and more formal register. It's like when you are going to ask a stranger to go out with you, it's like, excuse me, would you like to go for a coffee? Well, this isn't being fake. It is being socially appropriate. we gauge the distance and choose the right language for it. And for the last branch is social role or setting. This is the situational relationship, unlike the other, which is the horizontal and vertical relationship, right? The key question here is, what is the specific social situation or our roles within it? A perfect example is a doctor and a patient. In the clinic, their interaction is defined by their roles. The doctor uses professional, technical jargon, such as the MRI show a minor meniscus tear. But later, if they meet in a different setting, in a different situation, for an instance, they meet at their children's school concert, the same two people interact as a parents, not as a doctor and patient anymore. The language instantly shifts to casual everyday talk, such as, "Hey, great to see you. How is your son liking soccer?" The people haven't changed, but the context of the setting has completely altered their linguistic roles. So, I'm going to provide you guys with the example of the context in a video.
The context of a situation depends on who you are communicating with, where you are, what you are communicating about, and why you are communicating in the first place. In low context cultures, the way people communicate doesn't vary so much. It tends to be more formal, and people focus on the subject matter rather than the person they are communicating with. In a business setting, problems and differences are often dealt with early on. Once an agreement has been reached, the details are often recorded and written down. In low context cultures, detailed contracts are an essential part of doing business. Once a contract is signed, it can rarely be changed, and it is used to settle any disagreements that might arise in the future. In high context cultures, the focus is on the people involved. Relationships are a key part of communication. When doing business, people remain flexible and change can happen at any time. Problems are often put to one side and only dealt with when absolutely necessary.
Communication is at the heart of how we connect, collaborate, and build relationships. But did you know that the way we communicate can differ significantly? Some people are direct, saying exactly what they mean, while others take a more subtle and cautious approach. These are the two main communication styles, direct and indirect. In this video, we'll explore the key traits of each style and how they influence our interactions. So, let's start. Direct communication is a style of communication where individuals express their thoughts, feelings, and ideas openly, clearly, and straightforwardly, without relying heavily on context or implication. Now let's discuss some features of direct communication. First, people with a direct communication style tend to take charge. They're assertive, outspoken, and radiate self-confidence. Second, they maintain strong eye contact, express their opinions openly, and often speak faster and louder than others. Third, direct communicators are competitive and confrontational, thriving in situations where boldness is rewarded. Their tone can sometimes come across as aggressive, and their impatience is noticeable. Indirect communication is a style of communication where individuals convey their thoughts, feelings, and ideas subtly, often relying on context, implication, and nonverbal cues rather than explicitly stating their message. Let's discuss some features of indirect communication. First, indirect communicators take a more reserved approach. They often hesitate to contribute in meetings and prefer a tentative communication style. Second, they're more patient, cooperative, and diplomatic, and they listen to others carefully before speaking. Third, indirect communicators are cautious and prefer a conservative visual appearance. They avoid confrontation and are masters of diplomacy. While direct communicators dominate discussions, indirect communicators bring balance with their thoughtful contributions and diplomacy. Each style has its strengths and challenges. Recognizing these differences can help us improve teamwork, build stronger relationships, and communicate more effectively. Understanding the spectrum of communication styles is key to building bridges and fostering connection.
Now, after watching the video, how does this all differ from cultural context? This comparison is vital. Cultural context provides the broad group-level rules. It's like the operating system for a whole society. For example, the cultural rule in Japan is that bowing is polite, but with an addition of interpersonal context is about the specific person-to-person adjustments. It's the software running on that system. So how you bow in Japan depends on interpersonal factors. We will bow differ to a boss, which is someone who has high authority than you, someone who holds the power, than to a friend. To a friend is more, they are more related to the branch of closeness. So following both the cultural and interpersonal rules simultaneously. So it's like cultural context defines the act, and the interpersonal context defines the degree based on the relationships. So, in summary, effective communication isn't just about knowing the words. It's a delicate dance of navigating power, closeness, and setting. Mastering interpersonal context means understanding that we must constantly adjust our language, not just to who we are talking to, but also to where we are and what our relationship is in that moment. It's the key to being not just understood, but also being appropriate and respectful. This final slide brings us the most important takeaway of our entire session. Understanding both cultural and interpersonal context is not just an academic exercise we do for a grade. It is in fact the very foundation of effective and meaningful communication. Think about it. Without this understanding, we are just exchanging words. We might be grammatically correct, but we risk being socially and culturally wrong. We might be heard, but we will not be understood. Knowing the cultural context is like having a map of a country. It shows you the general lay of the land, the major customs, and the national language. But knowing the interpersonal context is like having a GPS for each individual conversation. It tells you exactly how to navigate the specific relationships, the power dynamic, and the level of closeness you have with the person right in front of you. So, in conclusion, you need both the map and the GPS to successfully reach your destination. You need both context to ensure your message is not just received, but is also interpreted as you intended. It is the difference between simple transmission and true connection. It transforms communication from being merely correct to being appropriate, respectful, and ultimately meaningful. This is the crucial skill that moves us from being just speakers of a language to becoming truly effective communicators across culture. That's all from me. Thank you for paying attention to my slide.